Hi, I'm Dan and welcome to the Airbrush Garage. If you're new here, welcome. If you're returning, thanks for coming back. I've been getting some requests to do a beginner, basic airbrush tutorials. So today I'm going to be doing just that. We're going to start off with a little bit on how I mix my paints, some of the air pressure I use, and then some basic shading, lines, and shapes, and what the airbrush can do. So with that, let's get started. So for the purpose of this tutorial, I pre-mixed up a little black in my Iwata Eclipse. It is a gravity feed gun that has a 0.35 needle nozzle combination. It is what's referred to as the workhorse of most people's toolboxes that use Iwata. It's about a medium of middle of the road airbrush. It costs about $180. So anyway, a little bit on how I mix my paint. And I just put some straight black in here, and I use a 1-to-1 mix is where I start. Okay, so 1 part paint, 1 part reducer. Now, something to be said about reducer. I still say in all the videos that I ever do when I talk about reducer is, please get the reducer that comes with the paint. I know there's lots of videos out there with Windex solutions and soapy water solutions. I just forget it, stop, don't do it, okay? I happen to be using Createx. I've been using it for 20 years. I like that paint. Again, there's lots of good paints out there, and whatever you get used to, and you know, you trust me, there's a lot of good ones. Createx isn't the only one. But if you are using Createx, I'm using the 4011, okay? And anybody that knows about the 4011 anymore, just buy that as your straight up reducer. The 4012 is a good reducer with a lot of the paints. But that was their older reducer, and honestly, most people like myself just reduce that to a cleaning agent anymore, and we go with the 4011. It just works with all of their products as far as their new clears that they came out with, because when they came out with the new clears, the 4012 didn't work. It didn't work real well with the Candy 2Os either. So the 4011 just is an all-around great reducer. So with that said, I'm going to show you how I mix my paint right in my cup. So I put some paint straight into my cup, okay? And I put some reducer in there. I told you 1-to-1. Now, what I like to do is when you go to a Chinese restaurant or a Japanese restaurant and they ask you if you want chopsticks, you always say yes. They're great mixing sticks. Keep a bunch on hand all the time. I like to mix up right in my cup. Usually have a paper towel set aside so I don't drip it all over. Now, that gets it mixed up in the cup, but some paint goes down in here, down where you can't get to with mixing. So what I like to do is I call it a backwash. I'm sure other people have other names for it. Take your fingers, pinch it over the needle, and again, I remove the cap, the needle cap. I don't spray with the needle cap on. Till you see a bubble. Now I made the bubbles come out a little bit so you can see it. So what you're doing is you're pushing air back through, and it's mixing it all up in your cup. Now, the other thing to it, reducers, is if you let it sit aside, which I usually don't because I'm usually anxious to get sprayed, the longer you let it sit, you know, a few minutes, it helps the reducer to react with the paint a little better. Now, for this tutorial, I'm spraying at about 30 PSI, and it's about usually where I like to spray, unless I'm doing some really, fine work. And I might go down to about 20 PSI, but for the majority of spraying that I do, I use about 30 PSI. I know you're learning the basics now, but you always want to warm up before you start spraying. And learning these basics, a lot of times just going over to the side, taking a minute or two, and just doing these exercises before you actually go perform your artwork. Even the most seasoned pros do it. It's just called a warm up. So with that, let's get started. First thing we're going to start off with is a solid color. Okay, so when you do solid patterns, you're going to overlap 50%. So whatever your spray pattern is, you're going to come back over half of it. Now, this is the same principle that you're going to use whether it is for an airbrush or an automotive spray gun. It's 50% rule. So that's if you want to shade something in, just completely blackened out. Now, if you want a gradient pattern, okay, where you're going to go from dark to light, okay, you want to play around with the distances you're going to be away from your board. One of the things you really want to learn with your airbrush is that you want to keep your air on all the time. So when you're spraying, you don't want to stop. You know, it's even hard for me not to keep the air on all the time just because I'm so used to it. But you want to keep the air on, and you want your finger going back and forth with letting the paint on and off. Okay, it's very important that you keep your air on all the time, and you just start and stop your paint while your air is on. So with that said, we're going to do a bunch of dots right here, and as you'll hear, my air will not shut off. So what we're going to do is we're going to start farther away from the surface at first, and we're going to do some big dots. We're going to do them all the way down to small dots. Okay. See how that looks far away? A little closer. My hose got caught. It's the only reason why I stopped. So as you can see, and as you heard, my air stayed on all the time. So paint on, paint off, paint on, paint off, paint on, paint off, and all the way down. Now, I did forget to mention, with this particular setup, it is a 3.5 needle nozzle combination on the Iwata, which is about medium of the road. You know, a lot of your siphon guns are going to be a 0.4, 0.5. You're going to get a lot more paint flow out of those. And then on down to your microns and your other, type of airbrushes that you got your 0.2, 0.18, 0.2 needles. Obviously, the smaller the needle, the finer the detail. But I'm going to show you right here, you can get some really fine detail out of this particular brush out of a 3.5. You can see those really, really fine dots I got going on right there. Now, let's do a little bit of outlines. Okay, so the lines, we're going to start off with a nice broad line. Okay. Now, again, depending on how far away you are from your work surface is going to depend on what that line looks like, the intensity of it, and the crispness of it. Now, so this is pretty far away. You got a nice thick line, and it's kind of, you got some overspray going on. But if this gun is well capable of doing nice, small, thin lines. So you can see you get some fine detail with this gun. It's really important in your practice routines that you really get the hang, again, I call it finger muscle memory control, of that you don't want to be thinking about what your finger's doing when you're painting. You just want to be looking at what you want to paint, and your finger's going to do exactly what you want it to do. The only way to do that is to get your finger onto this gun and keep practicing all of this stuff that we got going on here right now. And it does take quite a few weeks, it might take months. It took me a couple months actually. Yeah, you do paint some things in between, but you really need to get these basics down so you get some good control of your gun. Now, the next thing we're going to do is a dagger stroke. The dagger stroke is probably the most important stroke that you could probably learn in airbrushing. Okay, now a lot of the tutorials out there are very similar to the one I'm showing you now, but a lot of them I think fall short on telling you exactly the technique of how to do a dagger stroke. Okay, so a dagger stroke is basically you're going to put airflow on first, then you're going to pull back on the paint, and then as you're going across, okay, the surface, you're going to go from a distance away from your surface, and as you're moving across, you're going to gradually get closer to your surface, and eventually you're going to cut your paint off. When you do, you keep the gun moving. So it's going to create a thick to a really thin line, creating a dagger. So you can see how it's going from thick to that really pointed line. That's your dagger, okay? So you can practice lines, you can practice swirls with it. Okay? You can practice. I think one of the best things to practice is a palm tree. You can do yourself a nice little island scene, you know, where you do a little palm tree. Okay, that's all dagger strokes. There's a dagger stroke to do the trunk. You're starting it off. Okay, just give yourself a trunk. Start off your dagger in the middle. Okay, so again, dagger strokes, as you can see, real thick to real thin. Same thing when you're doing some grass maybe. You know, you want to get in real tight. Again, further away, in closer. You know, you're getting real tight to do some grass. It's all dagger strokes. So, again, the technique is, now you can see when I'm getting real close how thin I can get and keeping the brush moving. But the whole thing is air on, paint back, paint off, brush keeps moving. Okay? The brush moves past where you put the paint off. So you're dragging that paint, okay? Because as your finger's going back, as quick as it may be, you're letting less paint out of the gun, but you're still moving the gun. So that's why you get that effect. All right. Well, there's one more thing I want to show you. And we're going to turn a little ball into a 3D object. I'm going to show you how something would look flat and how an object would look flat and how we get it to look 3D. So I have this this template from Airsick, my circle template. I'll pop a link down below of all the products that I use in today's video. But so I masked it off a little bit because otherwise you will get your overspray. Okay, so there's other circles on this template, but so I masked it off, and I'm going to show you how you're going to go from a 2D object to a 3D. Okay. So as you can see, there's no depth to that. It's just flat. So this is my negative mask right here. So what you want to do is, after you dust it in like that, okay, when you're doing something round, I call it a smile. And I'm going to put the smile in, and what you have to remember when you want to change something from 2D into 3D is you have a light source, okay? And where the light is coming from. In this case, we're going to have the light coming from this way, okay, from the top. Okay, so it's going to create a shadow right here. So I'm going to come in here. I'm going to paint my smiley face. Okay, so let's see what that did. Look at that. So now it's amazing that just by, you know, adding this little darker shadow in here, all of a sudden our light source is now coming, it's rolling over the object and fading back into the background. Now, if you really want to make it into some 3D, even better, let's take the positive mask. We'll put it over there. And throw a little shade on the bottom side. And again, you remember all you're hearing is air. You hear I don't shut my air off at all. Well, there you have it. It's just that quick, okay? But it's all really learning the strokes and the control on the trigger, okay? Paint on, paint off, air on all the time. Okay, so when you're doing any of these practice techniques, whether they're dots or they're lines, the dagger strokes, whatever it is, you're going to be best served to learn that trigger control with air on all the time and use your paint on off. Well, thanks for stopping by the Airbrush Garage today. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, hit that subscribe button down below. Give it a thumbs up, share it out with your friends and family. Don't forget my affiliate links down below. All of these products that I used are down there. Give them a click. See you in the next video. Keep practicing. Peace out.